There are lesser commandments. So it is acceptable to break some commandments for the sake of the greater commandments. So when Jesus said the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath, I think that it means that the needs of human beings are more important than the commandment to rest on the Sabbath day.
He is the Son of Man. Now in this verse, he's saying, for the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath. Now, if you're Lord of the Sabbath, that means you have to be part of its origination, its establishment. All right, let's go back to when the Sabbath.
So the Sabbath is supposed to be a day of rest. You have to remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. You're not allowed to work on the Sabbath. Jesus is working on the Sabbath. His Jewish opponents come up to him and say, you're working on the Sabbath, because they're trying to catch him out. They don't like him. So they say, you're working on the Sabbath. And Jesus goes, have you not read what David did? And he says that King David does the same thing. And then he says, the Sabbath is made for man, not man for the Sabbath. So in other words, the reason that the Sabbath exists is for humankind's sake, so that we get our day of rest.
Yes.
The criticism he's making of the Jews there is that they've become too legalistic. They sort of forgot the whole reason why the Sabbath exists in the first place. It's not just there because God hates it when you work on the Sabbath. It's there for your sake. The Sabbath is made for man, not man for the Sabbath.
Yeah, so if we take a little longer to unpack things, it's because we have no choice.
We have to.
Jesus is saying is that God's purpose in giving you the law, read Deuteronomy 30. He wants you to live, not die. He wants to bless you, not curse you.
Yep.
Our Lord's point is, if you make the law cumbersome, burdensome, then you now kill the spirit of the law, because the law was given to bring life, preserve life, improve the quality of life, not diminish life.
Yep.
You understand? So what Jesus is saying is, by your traditions, you have now nullified the spirit of law. By your traditions, these things you've added, you've now killed the spirit of the law, which was...
The one thing that we see when we see Christian commentators and interpreters is the astonishing lack of depth and substance to any of their interpretations. For example, in this passage, the Son of Man is also Lord of the Sabbath. Just taking this one in isolation, it's just amazing to me how we claim that this is the greatest truth, that this truth of Jesus, Messiah, Jesus as the Lord God, is the greatest disclosed truth that could ever be and ever was in human history, but we treat it so dismissively and so submissively, almost like it's trash. And with this particular issue, you can just do a casual survey of all the people that comment on this online. And what you'll see often is an attempt to interpret this passage, and then as if it's some kind of curiosity, some kind of mysterious statement that needs to be cracked, they give it one or two sentences and basically move on. Well, this is what it means, or I think this is what it means. Atheists have the same approach to this. I watched a debate between David Wood and what's his name? Alex O'Connor. And O'Connor was perplexed at what Jesus meant by the statement, the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath. And judging by David Wood's response, he seemed to be a little perplexed as well. Well, we're not going to treat this in a superficial manner. As you know, on this channel, we do a pretty dense and thorough theological drill down in the short time that we have for each video, which is about 30 minutes. But the main emphasis on this channel is we don't want to put in a lot of words and a lot of detail and a lot of background information and a lot of explanation. What we really want to do is we want to get right down to the hermeneutical heart of what the New Testament is about, so that we can interpret them easily, because we have this we have this hermeneutical locus that we can always refer back to in order to understand all these passages. And that's what we're going to do here. So let me take this one step at a time, and let's be as thorough as we can. Now, in this passage, Jesus calls himself Lord of the Sabbath. He's not redefining permissible behavior inside a moral code. He's redefining what work itself means at the level of revelation. Remember that word work. We have to establish what that means in this context. The mistake is to assume that Sabbath controversy turns on ethics. It does not. It turns on ontology and prophecy. In the law, Sabbath work refers to human labor ordered toward sustaining the created order. It's the work of maintenance, provision, and survival within a world already given. That is why Sabbath rest is commanded. Man must cease his own sustaining action in order to acknowledge that God is the true sustainer. Now, keep in mind, we have to establish in that statement what is man's sustaining action, right? And how is that compared to God's sustaining action? The point is, Jesus is not performing that kind of human work here. When he heals on the Sabbath, he explicitly rejects the premise that he is violating rest by engaging in labor. Instead, he reframes the category entirely. My Father is working until now, and I am working. This is not a defense, it's a revelation. The Father's work after creation is not the maintenance of nature, nor the enforcement of law, nor the moral supervision of Israel. It is the redemptive work promised in the prophets. God's work post-fall is not rest, but restoration. And restoration is not governed by Sabbath prohibition because it is not creaturely labor. It is divine action fulfilling a word previously spoken. Okay. Now, this is why Jesus does not argue that healing is an exception to the Sabbath. He argues that it belongs to a different order of action altogether. Jesus' work is the completion of the prophetic task given to him by the Father. He is not performing deeds to demonstrate obedience to Torah as a moral system. He is enacting the vernacular word that promised sight to the blind, life to the dead, cleansing to the unclean, and restoration to Israel. These acts are not ethical demonstrations, they are prophetic fulfillments. In John's Gospel, this is made very explicit. Jesus repeatedly defines his mission not in terms of obedience to law, but in terms of completion of an assigned work. I have finished the work you gave me to do. That work is singular. It is not a collection of moral acts. It is a unified revelatory action stretching from incarnation to cross to resurrection. Sabbath, therefore, becomes the diagnostic fault line here. If Sabbath is understood as moral rest from rule breaking, Jesus is a violator. If Sabbath is understood as cessation from self-sustaining labor, Jesus is irrelevant. But if Sabbath is understood as the sign of God's completed creative work awaiting a promised restorative fulfillment, then Jesus' actions do not violate the Sabbath. They announce its true meaning. The Lord of the Sabbath does not suspend Sabbath. He completes what the Sabbath was pointing toward. This is why Jesus insists that his authority over Sabbath is identical to his authority to forgive sins, to give life, and to judge. All belong to the same prophetic mandate. He is not interpreting the law. He is bringing to completion the work the law anticipated but could not perform. So, when Jesus works on the Sabbath, he is not modeling an ethic. He's revealing a fulfillment. He's not showing what humans may do. He is showing what only the Son can complete. The prophetic word of Messiah, not moral law keeping, or an idea of its spirit or essence as we would have it. And this is precisely why the charge of Sabbath breaking provokes the charge of blasphemy. The issue was never conduct, it was identity. To claim the right to perform God's prophetically foreordained and predictive restorative work on God's day is to claim participation in God's own redemptive action. Yes, as God, but first as Messiah. Jesus must fulfill the Messianic scriptures before he is ever to be declared God by implication. That is what Lord of the Sabbath means. But there's a lot more here, so please listen. The phrase he used here, the Son of Man, is giving a definition. And it's not unique here. We can examine other occurrences of this to get the flavor of Jesus' meaning specifically. Why use Son of Man? First, the Sabbath saying itself in Mark 2:27 through 28, Matthew 12:8, and Luke 6:5 is already doing more than is often admitted. When Jesus says, the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath, he is not merely asserting authority over a regulation. He is asserting authority over the law's telos. In the prophets, Sabbath is not just a command but a sign of covenant fulfillment and rest. Isaiah 58, Isaiah 66. To be the Lord of the Sabbath is to be Lord of the covenantal sign that points forward to restoration. That already exceeds Daniel 7, strictly constructed, and presupposes a prophetic synthesis here. Second, the Son of Man's authority to forgive sins, Mark 2:10. This is one of the clearest functional definitions of this. Forgiveness of sins is not a Daniel 7 function. It belongs in the prophetic corpus to Yahweh acting in the new covenant, Jeremiah 31, Isaiah 43, Isaiah 53. When Jesus says the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins, the issue is not miracle working. The scribes understand immediately that this is a law-defining act, because forgiveness is the resolution of covenant breach. The Son of Man is here presented as the agent in whom the law's condemning function reaches its prophetic resolution. Third, the Son of Man as judge, according to response to himself, John 5:22 through 27. This is one of the most explicit redefinitions. Jesus says the Father has given all judgment to the Son, and then grounds this authority in the fact that he is the Son of Man. Judgment in the prophets is not abstract evaluation. It is covenantal adjudication according to fidelity to the word of Yahweh. For the Son of Man to exercise judgment is for him to be the personal locus where obedience or disobedience to the law is finally determined. This goes well beyond Daniel's vision of enthronement and places the Son of Man as the living criterion of Torah faithfulness. Fourth, the Son of Man as an object of eschatological allegiance. Luke 12:8 through 9, Matthew 10:32 through 33. Everyone who acknowledges me before men, the Son of Man will acknowledge before the angels of God. This is structurally prophetic. In the prophets, allegiance to Yahweh's word determines standing in the final judgment. Here, allegiance to the Son of Man determines that standing. The law's essential meaning, obedience to God's revealed will, is now mediated entirely through recognition of this person, Son of Man. Fifth, the Son of Man as the fulfillment criteria of Scripture, Mark 8:31, Luke 24:26 through 27, implicitly. Jesus repeatedly says that the Son of Man must suffer, using language that signals prophetic necessity. This is not Daniel 7 language at all. It is Isaiah 53, Psalms 22, Zechariah 12 through 13. The Son of Man is not merely the exalted figure after suffering. He is the interpretive key that binds suffering, law, and glory into a single prophetic trajectory. That is precisely what we mean here by the superior and essential meaning of the law. 6. The Son of Man is eschatological standard over angels and nations. Matthew 13:41, Matthew 25:31 through 46. In these sayings, the Son of Man sends angels, separates the righteous and wicked, and determines inheritance of the kingdom. This is language drawn from across the prophetic corpus, especially Daniel, Zechariah, and Isaiah, but the decisive point is that the law's final evaluative force is exercised personally by the Son of Man. Torah is no longer an external code, but a fulfilled revelatory reality embodied in Him. Now, what emerges from all this is consistent with our contention here. Son of Man is not merely an apocalyptic title. It's a prophetic office name that gathers law, judgment, forgiveness, Sabbath, covenant, and eschatology into a single personal locus. Daniel 7 supplies the throne room scene, but the meaning of the throne is supplied by the entire prophetic word. The Son of Man is Lord of the law, not because He abolishes it, but because He is the promised resolution. Now, we can isolate passages where Jesus deliberately avoids Messiah language, but uses Son of Man precisely because it allows this fuller prophetic law claim without triggering political expectations. Jesus avoids overt Messiah language, not because it is false, but because in the first century usage, it is already conceptually overloaded. Messiah had collapsed into a nationalistic, Davidic, restorationist shorthand. To say, I am the Messiah in public discourse would have been forced to identify His identity to be interpreted from below, through political expectation rather than from above through the prophetic word. Son of Man, by contrast, allows Jesus to define the category before it is conceptually closed. Here are the key ways this works with some representative sayings. First, Jesus uses Son of Man precisely where messianic expectation would misfire. In Mark 8:27 through 30, Peter confesses Jesus as the Messiah, and Jesus immediately silences him. The very next move is that Jesus begins to teach that the Son of Man must suffer many things. That transition is not stylistic, it is corrective. Messiah, as confessed by Peter, cannot yet bear Isaiah 53, Psalms 22, or Zechariah 12. Son of Man can. The title creates interpretive space for suffering as prophetic necessity, not as contradiction. Second, Son of Man allows Jesus to bind glory and abasement into a single identity without explanation. No Second Temple messianism required the Messiah to forgive sins, redefine Sabbath, or suffer execution. But the prophets do require that Yahweh's decisive act of restoration comes through humiliation before vindication. By saying the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins in Mark 2:10, Jesus avoids the messianic label entirely while still performing a Yahweh-exclusive covenant act. The scribe's objection proves the point. They do not hear a royal claim, they hear a divine one. Third, Son of Man permits Jesus to exercise Torah authority without appearing to replace Moses. Had Jesus said, "The Messiah says," every legal pronouncement would have sounded like a rival lawgiver. Instead, the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath, frames the issue prophetically rather than legislatively. The claim is not, "I changed the law," but "I am the one whom the law was always ordered." This aligns with the prophetic insistence that Torah's meaning is not exhausted by command but by fulfillment and rest, Isaiah 58, Isaiah 66. Messiah language alone can't carry that weight. Son of Man language can. Fourth, Son of Man allows Jesus to recenter judgment on recognition of himself without invoking kingship. In Luke 12, 8 through 9, acknowledgement or denial of the Son of Man determines eschatological standing. That is an extraordinary claim. In the prophets, judgment turns on response to Yahweh's word. Here, response to the Son of Man is response to that prophetic word. If Jesus said, "Acknowledge the Messiah," the claim would have sounded dynastic. By saying Son of Man, he grounds judgment in revelation recognized, not in office acknowledged. Fifth, the title lets Jesus invoke Daniel 7 without freezing its meaning. Daniel's vision supplies enthronement imagery, but it does not specify how the kingdom is won, how sin is dealt with, or how covenant breach is resolved. Jesus fills those gaps with Isaiah, the Psalms, and Zechariah. But he does so without constantly naming those texts. Son of Man becomes a mobile prophetic index, pointing backward to the entire oracular word while remaining undefined until the cross and resurrection force the synthesis. Sixth, this is why Jesus only allows explicit messianic identification after vindication is underway. At the trial in Mark 14, when the high priest asks directly, "Are you the Messiah?" Jesus answers, but he answers by fusing Psalms 110 and Daniel 7. "You will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power and coming with the clouds of heaven." Notice what he does not say. He does not say, "Yes, I am the Messiah." He redefines Messiah in prophetic terms at the moment of rejection. Only then does the title become intelligible, because only then can kingship be understood as vindicated suffering rather than political triumph. The pattern then is coherent and deliberate here. Look, Messiah names the office once the meaning is complete. Son of Man creates the meaning that Messiah must later bear. So when we argue that Lord of the Sabbath is not merely a Daniel 7 allusion, but a claim that the Lord of the law is the prophesied Messiah disclosed across the whole prophetic corpus, we are not extending the text artificially. We are reading the title the way Jesus uses it, as a prophetic compression term that resists premature conceptualization and forces the law, the prophets, and covenant judgment to be reread through the person who fulfills them. Now let's get right down to the heart of it and sum all of this up. And let us not be confused about this anymore. And let's not be superficial about the way that we approach this. When Jesus says that the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath, Lord names not only personal authority but epistemic mastery. Even if the personal aspect is set aside, the claim remains intact. A divinely demonstrated miraculous truth of God, when it comes to fruition, necessarily governs the pedagogical structure that was instituted to prefigure it. The law was never autonomous. It was a provisional form of instruction, teaching by sign and regulation what it could not yet display in reality. When the prophetic word is disclosed in history, no longer as command but as fulfilled revelation, that truth becomes master of the law that anticipated it. The Sabbath, therefore, yields not to arbitrariness, but to its own realized meaning. To be Lord of the Sabbath is to be Lord as the controlling prophetic truth by which the law was given, interpreted, and finally surpassed in purpose. Because fulfillment does not answer to the law, it rules it as its revealed end.